The Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series is underwritten by the Polsky Family Supporting Foundation in partnership with the Johnson County Community College Foundation, which seeks to educate and empower the public in the areas of health, financial independence, and topical issues not covered elsewhere.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Polsky Practical Personal Enrichment Series in Yardley Hall, Johnson County Community College. I'm Emily Bierman. Before we start the program, I'd like to request that we silence all cell phones or other electronic devices, please. Thank you. We're proud to bring you this special presentation during our Veterans Week celebration here at the college. But before we begin, we ask that you please rise for the presentation of colors. Thank you to tonight's color guard from the Munson Army Health Center. And now, please welcome Dr. Marilyn Reinhardt, Executive Vice President of Academic Affairs and Chief Academic Officer here at Johnson County Community College. Marilyn?
Thank you, and good evening to all of you. Tonight is part of Johnson County Community College's Veterans Week celebration. The Polsky series presents honoring the history and service of the Tuskegee Airmen. This seminar is made possible by the Norman and Elaine Polsky Family Supporting Foundation within the Greater Kansas City Community Foundation. The series is in partnership with JCCC and includes topics not currently offered elsewhere. We're grateful to Norman and Elaine Polsky and their family for providing an endowment to fund this series. I hope you'll join me in recognizing the members of the Polsky family who are in the audience with us tonight. You just wave. It's a great honor for me to introduce tonight's speakers. You'll hear more about them and from them in a few minutes, but let me tell you who our honored guests are. Captain George J. Dunmore, Charles Ellington, Ormer Rogers Jr., and Harvey McCormick. Thank you to each of you for your service to our country. As we pay tribute to our nation's veterans this week, we wanted to include a remembrance of the historical significance, dedicated service, and courage of the famed Tuskegee Airmen, America's first black military pilots. The Tuskegee Airmen celebrated their 70th anniversary this year. It was on July 19, 1941, that the pilots in the 332nd Fighter Group and other Tuskegee units began their flight training sessions at the Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama. This Air Corps of African American fighter pilots fought in the aerial war over North Africa and Europe. These brave pilots flew more than 15,000 sorties and completed more than 1,500 missions with the 12th Tactical U.S. Army Air Force and the 15th Strategic U.S. Army Air Force. And I'd like to just add on a personal note that about 20 years ago I had the opportunity to meet and spend some time with General Benjamin Davis Jr., who commanded the Tuskegee Airmen, and I must tell you that he was one of the most impressive individuals I have ever met. And I have an autographed copy of his autobiography, and it's something that I treasure. Our presenters this evening will share with you more about the historic origins of the famed Air Corps, the challenges faced by the 1,000 African Americans trained as military aviators, and the courageous combat achievements of the Tuskegee Airmen and their impact in terms of the United States victory in World War II. So again, I'd like to thank you for coming this evening. And now, to take you through the contents of the packet that you received when you arrived, I will turn the podium back over to Emily Bierman. Thank you. And thank you.
And now for our famous packets. In tonight's packet on the left side, you'll find a booklet about the Polsky series and about Norman and Elaine Polsky, who've made this series possible. We've provided a pen for you. And also on the right-hand side, a blue card for questions. So we will have a question and answer session towards the end of the program tonight. And as you watch the presentation, which includes a short film, please don't forget to write down some questions and hand them to an usher. There's also a green card in the packet for feedback and to join our email or mailing list. We'll soon start planning events for 2012, so don't be shy about filling out the green card and let us know how we're doing and what topics you may enjoy or have enjoyed as part of the Polsky series. Also on the green card, we hope you'll provide your email address and other contact information so we can keep you informed of future Polsky series events. Or send us an email at polskyseries@jccc.edu. There's also a handout on the right-hand side of the packet with facts and historical background of the Tuskegee Airmen, providing just a taste of what you'll learn tonight, and that's for you to take home tonight. And lastly, there's an envelope inside from the Johnson County Community College Foundation. We hope you'll consider making a donation to support the JCCC Veterans Scholarship Fund. We always record our Polsky presentations so that you can enjoy them later, and you can view all previous Polsky Series events on our website at video.jccc.edu. Programs are also carried on Channel 17, Time Warner and Shore West, and Channel 22 on Comcast. After tonight's presentation, our special guests will be seated out in the lobby, so if you'd like to meet them, ask questions, or get an autograph, they'll be happy to help you with that. And we'd also like to invite you to view some of the memorabilia on display that Captain Dunmore has brought with him this evening. And now a quick introduction of each of our speakers. Captain George Dunmore is retired from the Ohio Army National Guard with 21 years of service. He currently serves as Vice President and Public Relations Officer for the Heart of America chapter of the Tuskegee Airmen of America, Incorporated. A former reporter and editor for the Pittsburgh Courier, Captain Dunmore is a student of Black history and a contributing writer to the Kansas City Call. While Captain Dunmore is not one of the surviving original Tuskegee Airmen, he is the fourth member of his family to be associated with the Tuskegee Airmen, an organization that has open enrollment. Charles Ellington is one of the fewer than a dozen documented original Tuskegee Airmen who live in our area, and one of 6 original Tuskegee Airmen who are members of the Heart of America chapter of Tuskegee Airmen. Drafted in the early days of World War II, Charles was like many others. He applied for pilot training, but was later trained as a radio operator. He's retired from the United States Postal Service and a longtime resident of Topeka. Mr. Ellington now lives in Olathe, and it's an honor to have him here with us tonight. Also joining us for part of the presentation tonight is Ormer Rogers, Jr. Like Captain Dunmore, Mr. Rogers is well-versed in the history of the Tuskegee Airmen and will speak to us tonight about airmen who later went on to become national figures, some of whom you'll be surprised to recognize. Mr. Rogers was a paratrooper with the 101st Airborne Division of the United States Army and completed a tour of duty in Vietnam. He's a past president of the Heart of America chapter of Tuskegee Airmen and is retired after 40 years of service as a federal employee. He has a bachelor's and master's degree from Dallas Baptist University and Abilene Christian University, respectively. And now, to introduce tonight's film, George Dunmore.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. It wouldn't have been better if I wrote it myself. At this time, I'd like the members of the Heart of America chapter who are present to stand. Jack Adams isn't able to stand because he thinks he's McEnroe and he tore up his knee playing tennis. Would the other members that are here please stand? We have what we call documented original Tuskegee Airmen, and we do have 2 on the stage tonight, Mr. McCormick and Mr. Ellington. The young lady who stood up with the members of the chapter is Marcy Whitley. Her father, Morris Whitley, was an original Tuskegee Airman. During World War II, the United States Aviation Group had 3 distinct groups. There were the Army, Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard air units, all white males. Then there was the Women's Air Force Service Pilots, better known as the WASP, an organization that delivered planes from factories to various military bases and through other non-combat missions in the United States. Honored 2 years ago with the Congressional Gold Medal. They were all white females except for 1 Asian female. Then there was a unit referred to by some officials as the Tuskegee Experiment, officially listed as the 99th Pursuit Squadron and the 332nd Air Wing, These brave aviators were known by several names. Among themselves, as they were shunned by other units in the Army Air Corps and relegated to obscure air bases, they called themselves the Lonely Eagles. The German flyers against whom they fought referred to them, and pardon my German, Schwarze Wogenmenschen, which loosely means black airmen. The American bomber crews they escorted reverently referred to them as the Black Red-Tailed Angels, but to friends, families, and admirers at home, they became the Tuskegee Airmen, and articles published about them in black newspapers across the country, while mainly the white media ignored them. At this juncture, I must make a disclaimer. At one point in their service, after some 200 missions, Colonel Davis was congratulated by a superior for the Tuskegee Airmen record of never having lost a bomber. However, research conducted in preparation for the awarding of the coveted Congressional Gold Medal in 2006 revealed that perhaps some bombers were lost while being escorted by the Tuskegee Airmen. With the inception of the first class of Afro-American flight trainees in July 1941, 12 cadets and then Captain B.O. Davis, Jr., the only Afro-American to graduate from the United States Military Academy at West Point in the early part of the 20th century, where he was silenced as a cadet, meaning that no one spoke to him except in the line of duty. The Army was faced with another problem. When and if they graduated from flight school, they would be commissioned as second lieutenants. The Army at that time could not have black officers giving orders to white men, so 241 enlisted men were sent to train as support personnel at Chanute Field, Illinois. Ultimately, there would be 992 Afro-Americans graduating as pilots and officers at Moton Field, Tuskegee, Alabama. It is estimated that eventually there were some 14,000 support personnel for these flyers. They were and still are recognized as Tuskegee Airmen. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce our past president, Mr. Ormer Rogers.
Thank you, George. And good evening, everyone. I have the honor of being able to share with you tonight just a brief portion of what the Tuskegee Airmen did after the war. And some of them went on to have very distinguished careers. Although the Tuskegee Airmen became known for their fighting prowess during World War II, however, after the war, when they applied for jobs as a pilot at major airlines, they were told, "We don't hire Negroes." When Colonel Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. was named executive officer of the troop ship that ferried some 3,000 troops from the harbors of New York to North Africa, it was believed that this was the first time that an African-American officer had been placed to command of white troops. In the spring of 1945, Colonel Davis was reassigned to command the 477th Medium Bombardment Group and as commandant of Godman Field near Fort Knox, Kentucky. This was the first time that an African-American had been named commanding officer of a stateside United States military base. He later was given the command of Lockbourne Air Force Base near Columbus, Ohio. His success in leading the integrated workforce at both bases is believed by many to be the impetus towards the total integration of all military units following the issuance of President Harry Truman's famed Executive Order number 9981. Davis went on to be promoted to Lieutenant General, a rank he held upon retirement. President Bill Clinton, during his presidency, returned him to active duty for one day and presented him with his 4th star. Many other members of the Tuskegee Airmen went on to have an impact on the American scene. Roscoe Brown, a pilot who had enlisted in the Army the day after graduating at the head of his class at Springfield College in Massachusetts. He made remarks that the Tuskegee Airmen were probably the most talented group of African Americans ever brought in one place. While regulations stated that many members of the Army who had a high school education could apply for pilot training, many of the first Negroes selected for flight training were required to have some college and preferably some flying experience. Brown went on to become one of the first pilots, black or white, to down the new entrance into the war, the German jet plane. After leaving the service, Brown returned to graduate school and earned his PhD at New York University. He went on to a distinguished career as an administrator at the City University of New York. John B. Turner was a longtime dean of the School of Social Work at Western Reserve University in Cleveland. Turner retired as Keenan Professor of Social Work at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, where the School of Social Work's building is named in his honor. Chappie James, upon receiving his 4th star, became the first African American to achieve that rank in any branch of the services. William T. Coleman, upon leaving the service, joined the legal staff of the NAACP and assisted in the historic Brown versus Topeka Board of Education landmark case. He was later named as Secretary of Transportation by President Gerald Ford. The unit's only ace, Lee Archer, was credited with shooting down 4.5 German planes. He returned home to New York, where he became a very successful businessman, helping other entrepreneurs get off the ground. Percy Sutton, another Tuskegee Airman, returned home to New York and started a media empire which still flourishes in the New York area today. He later served as the elected president of the borough of Manhattan from 1965 to 1977. Coleman Young, who was also a graduate of the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, became mayor of the city of Detroit and one of the most powerful African-American elected officials in the United States in the 1970s. Today, descendants of 2 outstanding Tuskegee Airmen are prominent in the world of television news. CNN's Frederica Whitfield is the daughter of Sergeant Major Whitfield. He was a track star at Ohio State and competed in the Olympics, winning a gold medal. Good Morning America's Robin Roberts is the daughter of Lieutenant Colonel Roberts, who was named one of Mississippi's most outstanding citizens shortly before his death a few years ago. Locally, 3 founders of the local Heart of America chapter of Tuskegee Airmen left their mark on the greater Kansas City area. As you saw in the film, Colonel Charles McGee, who flew combat in 3 wars, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. It not only became the first African American to command the nearby Richard Garbaras Air Base, but went on to manage the Kansas City downtown airport. He holds a record for the most combat missions flown by an American aviator, and this past summer, he was inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame. McGee also served as a city manager at Prairie Village, Kansas. Broussard Watkins and Herman Johnson have both been honored by Kansas City for their civic contributions. Portions of Highway 71 in Missouri is named Broussard Watkins Freeway, and a cultural center on Blue Parkway is named in his honor. Herman Johnson, who served in the Missouri legislature, has a bridge named in his honor on 27th Street as it crosses the Paseo. Also, a dormitory at the University of Missouri, Kansas City is named as a memorial to him and his wife, Dorothy, for their work establishing scholarships for needy students. John Davis, one of several pilots from the Kansas City area, returned home to Kansas City, Kansas to become one of the first African Americans to own a franchise with the Standard Oil Company. William Bill Francis retired as a lieutenant colonel and became the flight safety officer for the FAA and was the first African American to hold that position. Harvey Bayless is not with us tonight because at this time of year there's a big demand on the Tuskegee Airmen to be at various places, so Harvey Bayless is in Branson for the celebration homecoming for veterans in Branson. So he's there tonight, but Harvey Bayless was an engineer and was a very successful person in the civil service of the federal government. George Boyd, who is also in Branson right now at that celebration. George Boyd held several positions within the state of Kansas, but he was also head of the Civil Air Patrol, the commander for Civil Air Patrol for the state of Kansas. Also earned his PhD. John Adams Jr. is a very humble individual. He graduated and was a pilot, but before he could go overseas, the war ended. And if you talk with him in person, he would tell you he did absolutely nothing, but he was one of that 992 that George just mentioned earlier as graduating of flight training. But he had a very successful career with the U.S. Postal Service. We have on the stage Harvey McCormick on the end here. Harvey McCormick, having served with the Tuskegee Airmen down in Tuskegee, went on after his military. Well, in fact, he stayed in the reserve, but meantime, he was also a student and went and got his law degree and became a judge. So Judge McCormick is with us tonight. We have Charles Ellington, who's here also tonight. Charles Ellington spent his time there in Tuskegee with the group as well, and Charles Ellington came home and had a illustrious career with the Postal Service as well. Charles Kerfoot was a cadet, and Charles Kerfoot is the one that I always tease because of the fact Charles Kerfoot became a mortician, and I always call him the Undertaker. And Charles would always do this to find out what size of a casket I needed. But he was also so well skilled in his profession that he was for a number of years on staff at the VA hospital in that system, teaching them how to maintain and care for the bodies after they had passed away. Now, those are just a few of the ones I wanted to name right now because of the fact there's so many things that's happening in this theme tonight, but we are short on time. But in 2006, Congress acknowledged the accomplishment of the Tuskegee Airmen by awarding them the prestigious Congressional Gold Medal. Surviving original Tuskegee Airmen were recognized in a ceremony at the nation's capital in 2007 by President George W. Bush. So there was some recognition that has come along to the Tuskegee Airmen at this late date in time, of which is all still very appreciative. Thank you.
This time we would like to thank Johnson Community College and the Polsky Foundation for sponsoring this forum. We'd also like to thank all of you for coming out to hear us tonight tell you about the Tuskegee Airmen. The Tuskegee Airmen of America Incorporated have some 50 chapters across the country, and our purpose is not only to encourage youth to enter the aerospace community, but also to preserve the memory and the history of our brave forefathers known as the Tuskegee Airmen. We meet the fourth Saturday of every other month at the DAV Hall in Kansas City, Missouri. We have an open membership and would love to have you join our organization. Just ask any of our members who you can identify by our pocket patch for further information. We thank you for your interest in the Tuskegee Airmen. I think at this time, Emily's going to have question and answer period.
Thank you, George. George is correct. Now is the portion of our program when we'll go to questions from the audience. I do have a couple here, but if you have questions for any of our presenters this evening, if you would write it on the blue card and kind of hold it up, and one of the ushers will come around and collect it from you, and then they'll bring them up here to us so we can get to all of those burning questions you have in your mind right now. Well, gentlemen, the first question I have is probably pretty basic, and it is, what is the difference between a sortie and a mission?
My understanding of sortie, Colonel Neville, maybe you can help me out. A sortie is an individual where a mission would be a force going out. Does that answer the question for whoever asked? Sortie is an individual, a mission is a group going out.
Individual action within the group. Individual action within the group.
Okay, so we started off pretty simple, and now we'll move ahead. And this is for any of you. So while at the Tuskegee Institute, did the airmen also attend Tuskegee University, and were there collaborations between the two?
They were actually separate operations. Moulton Field is where the Tuskegee Airmen was training and everything, and the Tuskegee University or Tuskegee College at the time was really separate and apart from the whole aviation portion of that experiment.
Okay, great. Anything else from anybody else? Charles has given me a look over here.
When they were setting up the training for the Afro-American pilots, several sites were suggested. Some groups did not want it to be in the South due to the segregation. Chicago was considered. Other places were considered. They could have been the Chicago Airmen because there was a flying school in Chicago, the Coffee School, that basically trained most of the black aviators at that time. So there was some sentiment to have it in Chicago, and some people suggested Detroit or even California for the more favorable weather. But negotiations got to the point where Tuskegee was selected. Often people want to know, some of them do not know about Tuskegee. Tuskegee is one of the original historic black universities, and one of their leading figures was George Washington Carver, who I'm sure most of you have heard of.
He invented peanut butter.
That's right.
He's a hero in my book, right? For Charles or for Harvey, tell us a little bit about the training that you received and the most challenging part of the training for you, what you found most rewarding.
Well, me?
Yes, sir.
I didn't understand your question.
Okay, let me say this, because they did not go to flight training itself. They were actually support crew.
No, I didn't take flight
ground
training.
crew.
Okay.
No, I didn't take flight training.
Well, tell us a little bit about your experience.
Say what?
Tell us about your experience with
my
the airmen.
experience? Well, I wanted to fly airplanes, sure. I wanted to fly airplanes very bad since I was a little boy. And when I was in high school, a friend of mine and myself, we took the examination for aviation cadet. He had 2 or 3 years at Morrisman. He was older than me. I was right out of high school. I think that was a detriment. Because they was looking for guys with more experience, older guys, you know, and he made no doubt he made a better score, and he had college behind him, and I was right out of high school. Okay, well, he went on and became a pilot. Me, they didn't call me for anything, so I was drafted, and being I had already taken the examination for aviation cadet, it kept me from going to the Navy. It kept me from going to the infantry and all those places I didn't want to go.
So it was lucky for you that you were a young pup. That's
yeah,
right.
So I took basic training, and I finally ended up in a communications school in down southern part of Missouri, down by Pittsburgh, Kansas. And they found out I had an aptitude for a radio, being a radio operator. Mm-hmm. I could hear those sounds and pick up and know what they were. So anyway, they sent me to Daniel Field, Georgia, for radio training, where I learned to send and receive messages in Morse code. I see. And after I received the training, then they sent me to Godman Field, Kentucky, when they was forming that organization. That organization for for war purposes. They had Colonel Davis was the commanding officer, and they had B-47 fighter planes there, B-25 bombers, medium bombers, and there were 8 of us, and we were radio operators, and we formed a group to send messages back and forth to the bases on the East Coast, and also to some of the airplanes if they had radio.
I see.
Operators.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how about you, Mr. McCormick?
Well, I didn't receive any pilot training, but I was a ground officer, supply officer, and I roamed around quite a bit before I wound up at Tuskegee. My first assignment was Leonard Ward, Missouri. I don't want to go there anymore. Then the next stop was Mississippi. I don't want to go there anymore. Next place was Ellington Field, Florida. Then Belvoir, Virginia. Then Jefferson Barracks, Missouri. I don't want to go there anymore. Then, of course, I was shipped to Truexfield, Wisconsin, Madison, near the University of Wisconsin, and put a lot of people at the University of Wisconsin. But eventually I was accepted for the Officer Candidate School in Miami, Florida, which meant that I have to leave Wisconsin in November, I believe it was, travel all the way to Florida, where I almost suffocated. It was very hot. And I received the Officer's Training and Officer Candidate School. And upon my graduation, I was assigned to Tuskegee. Stayed there for 2 years.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Maybe you all can help me out a little bit and describe the flight training that these men received. How long was the training, and how long did they train before they got to fly?
I didn't quite hear you. My hearing isn't the best.
I'm going to come back down here. The question was, how long was the flight training that the pilots received, and how long were they in training before they actually got to fly? It may have varied for everybody, I realize.
I'm trying to remember. I can't tell you exactly. Colonel Nevis, can you help me out? No. What was the time of training for the pilot training?
We have a B-52 pilot. It's a part of our group here that
there's some conferring going on in the front row down here.
I don't
The training was less than a year? So several months, maybe. Okay. This question
What was
is,
the second half of the question?
well, was how long did they train before they actually got to fly? So it sounds like a few months, several months. Okay, so up to a year to graduate and get your wings, and then you can fly. Then you're a pilot. Okay. Here's a good question. Why did the airmen paint the tails of their planes red? Why was that color chosen?
Well, there's several answers to that, and one of the answers was red paint was all that they could get. But you must remember, various groups had various tail markings, because you have to understand that flying, a lot of times you got dispersed, so you could look, it was easier for you to regroup if you could look at the tails of your planes. So some squadrons had checkerboard on their tail assembly, so they'd know to reassemble that way. So it was just a form of identification, and the rumor is that red paint was all that was left when they wanted to get the tails painted something.
Most red is easy to see, that's right. Most people were painting everything camouflage, right? So red, you can't hide behind your red. That's just my interpretation, sorry. Here's a great question. Mention some of the contributions of black women to this effort. This person's saying, I'm aware of nurses, but I'm wondering if women served in other capacities in the unit.
Well, you had nurses, and oddly enough, some of the first mechanics at Tuskegee were females due to the shortage of male mechanics, you know, in the regular Army. So quite a few of the first mechanics were females. And incidentally, some of you aren't old enough to remember, well, you might have seen war pictures, but a lot of the flyers would have paintings of starlets on their planes. Some of them had Rita Hayworth or Betty Grable, and the Tuskegee Airmen were fortunate enough to have a young lady by the name of Lena Horne, who came around quite often and entertained them. Unfortunately, we lost Lena several months ago.
I saw a picture that they had women sewing. What was up with that?
The question is, women, there are photographs in the film about women sewing. What would that have been? Uniforms?
Some of them were parachutes.
Making parachutes? Okay, good question. Here's somebody who asked if you ever had the chance to know or meet Maynard Pop Foster. Do we know?
No.
No, we don't. Okay. Any other questions out there?
There's one there.
Oh, let's go over here quickly. Yes. The question is there going to be a Tuskegee War Museum, and have any of the planes been saved for possible display in a museum setting?
There is a museum right now. The Parks Department runs it, and it's in Tuskegee itself, at Moulton Field. That is the National Museum of the Tuskegee Airmen. There are several others around the country, though, one in Detroit, as a matter of fact, and then there's another in California. And there are others right now in Topeka, I believe, is they're trying to start one now that's not Tuskegee per se, but it's an aviation museum. The P-51, if you saw here a few months ago where there was a P-51 in a air race that actually crashed out in, I believe it was in Nevada, I believe it was, Reno. And there's only a few of them flying right now that's in this country, and that one had been really modified for speed. And there's another one that's right now that the commemorative Air Force has restored and is going around the country right now, P-51. And so it will at one point be a static display someplace. They are very expensive to restore when you can find one. And so I would say that at some point in time there will be some planes on display, but not necessarily the P-51, maybe some of the others as well as that the Tuskegee Airmen flew.
Do you all ever have, I know you have, we'll get to, I have a question. You have your chapters around the country of Tuskegee Airmen. Do you ever have a reunion, kind of a national gathering of the gentlemen who are affiliated?
Each year, in the month of August. Just had one this past August in Washington, D.C. And I forgot the next one's in San Antonio.
Las Vegas.
Las Vegas. Next
Las
summer,
Vegas.
Take plenty of money.
Very good. There was a question over here.
Did anyone feel intimidated by the successes of the Tuskegee Airmen? What was the reaction of the white supremacists to the successes of the Tuskegee Airmen?
The question was, what was the reaction to the success of the Tuskegee Airmen by white supremacists?
If you look at some of the books that have been written by various ones, it's all over the place in a sense as to how some of the things that happened. Now, I know Judge McCormick can tell you a story in terms about how he was on a train, I guess it was, in the German POWs were allowed to ride the train up front, and the African-American soldiers had to go to the rear. And the POWs from Germany were treated better than the African-American soldiers in this country, back in this country. So that was what they call double V, victory in war there and victory back at home. There was a big problem when the war ended as to what would you do with all of these pilots and all the people who had more or less gained this profession that no other way would they have gotten it as far as that go, because at that point in time, blacks could not work on white planes and whites could not work on black planes. So thereby you had to train a whole cadre of blacks to maintain a Air Force for the blacks. So these individuals got trained and had a profession when they ended the war. But then what would you do with them afterwards? And so those who stayed in the military were all assembled at that time, Rickenbacker, Lockbourne Air Base, and there was a major issue as to what do you do with them. So that became the base where everybody assembled until there was, I guess, the 1947 when the military was totally integrated, and the Air Force was the first to do that, that they were able to then disperse out into other units around the country. But it was a major problem as to what would you do with these individuals once they came back from the war with all this experience and everything, but they could not find jobs in those particular fields.
It was no secret that you did have some base commanders who were outright racist. There are instances where the Afro-Americans were not allowed in the PXs or the officers' clubs. Especially the PXs, some of the Afro-Americans were very upset because they were not allowed to go into the PX. But when they looked up, they saw Italian and German prisoners of war patronizing the PXs, and that didn't sit too well with them.
Well, yet the study that was done said that black people were not capable of being able to do this successfully, and when you were able to do this successfully, what was the explanation for that?
Well, I don't think there was ever any true explanation. The War Department just kind of let it go by at that point. There was no real aha moment that came out of that. It just happened. And then when the war ended, it just brought about another set of problems that this country had to face with these individuals coming back asking for certain things that they were justly qualified for, but were refused, though.
You said the Air Force was the first branch of service to integrate.
Yeah.
Don't you feel that the Tuskegee Airmen and the success of that may have led to them to make that step?
I think it was, and I think it was mentioned earlier, B.O. Davis Jr. was a very unique individual. To have gone to West Point, the only African American in his class, for 4 years, had the silent treatment and all of that, he was a very straightforward individual, and the things that he did opened a lot of doors during the war and even after the war because of the respect that he gained from everyone, because he was a man of honor, and as a result of that was treated justly in that respect. So I think he opened a lot of doors because when he was able to come back home, and he was the base commander there at Lockbourne Air Base and Godman Field, then that opened up the door for reality. And at that time, really, the Air Force was born because at this point, the Air Force was a part of the Army. It was the Army Air Corps, and the Air Force was born in 1947. And so as a result of that, he was a part of this new wave. And I was able to then get others out into the system because of the fact if you came up under B.O. Davis, you were good. No doubt about it, you were good.
Thank you. One more question?
My question is, we were really enjoying this movie. Where can we find it so we can watch more and learn more?
Good you asked that.
Where can we find the movie?
We want to find this movie so we can see the rest of it, because there wasn't time to watch it all tonight. There's so much still yet to learn.
Okay.
Well, if you wait till January, there's a new film coming out, Red Tails.
January 20th, it'll be release date for that.
Released in January, and that we understand is going to be very factual because George Lucas put that together. There was an HBO movie, The Tuskegee Airmen, that some Tuskegee Airmen felt was very inaccurate. They combined characters, so on and so forth. One of the characters was named A-Train, and one of our flyers was actually called A-Train, and he would be at book fairs signing books, and people would come up and say, I thought you were dead because you got killed in the HBO movie. He says, no, I'm still here.
Okay, other questions? Yes, sir?
I don't have a question, but gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for opening up the doors for those of us that did join the military in combat aviation. I know you went through hell with gasoline drawers on to make it a lot better, so hats off to you.
Another question?
Did all your prisoners of war return after the war?
Did all the prisoners of war return?
Yeah, as far as I know, and one of our members, and by the way, we are not a segregated organization, the Tuskegee Airmen organization, and one of our members is white as far as that go, and he's not here tonight, but he tells a story of one of the Tuskegee Airmen, what he told him back in, when he was working in Michigan, that his plane was shot down, and he was a prisoner of war, and when they got him into the camp, the commandant of the camp took him out kind of to embarrass him and everything else and asked, who wants this black in your group and everything else? And everyone held their hand up. And so when he got with his group that he actually was assigned to, he asked, well, why did you all hold your hand up? You want me in here? You know, I'm black and everything. So the story was that we knew you were not a spy. Yeah.
Anything else? Okay, I think we're going to... somebody wants me to ask, is John Adams here? John Adams? Doesn't look like it. Sorry. I think our guests are going to move to the lobby, but Mr. McCormick is going to make a statement, and I'm going to give him the microphone to do so.
At the end of the war, I was able to interview 2 African-American POWs that were shot down and captured by the Germans. And they were assigned to a BOQ with me. And due to the fact they outranked me, they got the outside room. But nevertheless, I was able to interview them at length as to what treatment they received and all of that. And I one of them still lives in Detroit now, and I saw him a year or so ago. He vaguely remembered me. But I said, you came blundering into BOQ at 2 o'clock in the morning and woke me up. But in any case, he was shot down, and the catch to the whole thing is that the Germans apparently were able to desegregate the Army better than Americans because they put them all, Americans, in the same lockup and say, you're all Americans as far as we are concerned. So since that time, I've bought quite a few books on these POWs they did shoot down and capture 32 of the African-American pilots, and many of them were killed, of course. 66, I believe, were actually killed. But it's being a pseudo historian, I don't say I enjoy, but it fascinates me to read these accounts in these various books that has been put out since the war.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to invite all of you to join us in the lobby. I think we're going to be able to chat with each of you and answer more questions if possible. I want to say thank you for your service and for being here with us this evening. And I do have a little gift for each of you. The stage is bigger than it looks from out there when you're walking across. To our three coordinators of this program, we have special certificates for you from Johnson County Community College, so we want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to call upon the color guard to come and retire the colors, please.